Welcome back to News Talk. Thanks so much for staying with us, everybody. Women are getting conflicting information about when and how often to do breast self-exams and when to get screenings from a medical professional. In this segment, we want to help you sort out some of that confusion. Joining us now here in the studio, Sharia Thompson and Madeline Long-Gill. They're both with the Susan G. Komen Foundation. Thank you very much for coming in. It is great having you with us.
Thanks for having us.
The information that came out the other day about how often screenings of one kind or another should take place were interesting in that, one, they seem to represent what the experts say is the latest information based on all the studies and the research that's been done. But you basically have, it feels like, three major groups with three somewhat different sets of guidelines. And I know, Sharia, let's begin with you. I know this is creating confusion or uncertainty for people who just want to know, what should I do? What do we tell our daughter? What do we recommend for our moms, etc.?
Exactly, and I like that you said, what should I do and what should we tell our moms and our daughters, because this really is about the woman. And at the end of the day, women are confused. We really have to focus on letting women at any age really make this decision with their doctor and decide what screenings and when are right for them. I'm honored to be here today with Miss Madeline Long-Gill, who is a breast cancer survivor. And she's also a Komen advocate in science. And I think one of the interesting things, when we heard the guidelines, we were actually in St. Louis, and we were in the community and listening to women actually say, you know, where is this coming from? How can we actually make these choices? And so I'd love for Ms. Madeline to share a bit about her story, because what you'll find is screening, while you might go in that 1 year, in a case like Miss Madeline, she actually had already had her mammogram and found out that she had breast cancer. And I think that's really important to share.
Exactly. My aunt was diagnosed in 2011. My aunt was diagnosed with breast cancer. My aunt encouraged my mom to have a mammogram, and my mom had never had a mammogram. And my mom, after her diagnosis, said, I want you to go and have a mammogram. I had my mammogram earlier that year. So, you know, reluctantly, I was like, well, I promised her I would do it. I went in, I had the mammogram, and they said, I'm sorry to tell you, you have breast cancer. Gosh. And I think what changed everything was that once my mom was diagnosed, they had me to come back in and they did additional tests. But had I not gone in to have that mammogram, I don't know what would have happened. And that's what bothers me most about the guidelines. A woman has to stay connected to her doctor, and she also has to stay connected in terms of knowing her history and knowing what to look for. So that's my story.
We're fortunate in that across the disease spectrum generally, new tests are coming along all the time. And in general, whatever the disease or disease concern is, get tested earlier and get tested more often. That's sort of the general thrust of what we as patients are told by the medical community and the media, you know, what the media message is, etc. So the notion that less is more, or don't start so early, start later, and then you hear the very compelling stories of people like you, Madeline. To repeat what I said a moment ago, it is a confusing time.
It certainly is, and I think the other thing that we have to keep in mind is we have to empower women, and I think when you have this much confliction and individuals that we certainly respect what has been said by scientists and doctors, but you also see that in many communities, especially women of color, whether you're African American or Latina, we are getting diagnosed at later stages. And so in these communities, to wait even longer or to get into your 70s and not even get screening or do them later is certainly not going to help reduce death rates in our community. And so this is an imperative that women really move forward and take that empowerment and do what's right for them with their doctor.
I want to move forward in terms of our having a conversation with you, so let's open up the phone lines at 703-387-1020. You probably know we're able to take calls in the 11 a.m. hour, between 11 a.m. and noon. That's when we're live. That's when you can join the conversation, and we hope, given the importance of this topic, you will do so. Whatever your story or question or comment is, we've posted the number to the bottom of the screen, so join in. 703-387-1020. We'll go to the phones as your questions and comments come in. We talked with a doctor last week, right after this news broke, and I think there's confusion in the medical community, too. So I guess at the end of the day, patients connecting with their doctors and figuring out what works best for them is probably the best advice until maybe down the road we get a little more consensus around some of these issues.
And when we're out in the community, we're telling women we don't want them to get so focused on the number, because the numbers may change again. And that's where a lot of the confusion. So a lot of the women will fall through the cracks because they say, well, I'm not supposed to go in until I'm such and such age. We want them to stay connected to their providers. And we want the providers to spend a little more time and talk to the women about their risk. So that's our message. Family
history is something that we can become aware of. I started to say control. Of course, we don't control, but we can. It's up to us to educate ourselves about whatever health patterns might be in our families, so that we can, if nothing else, supply our doctors with that information, and they can put that to the best use possible.
Certainly, and that's actually one of the key messages that we give women. You've got to get screened, you've got to know your risk and know your family history, and also live healthy. But I think when you look at risk and family history, it's really important to keep in mind that most women that are diagnosed don't actually have a family history. And I think that when you look at Miss Madeline's story, her family has actually been tested. If you'd like to share your experience.
We had the BRCA test, and we were negative. And so that would not apply to us. And now we were told that there may be other mutations that, we could later on go for additional testing, but right now that wouldn't have applied. So when we say know your history, that would never have been our story.
So it's part of the puzzle. It is not the
entire thing. So you can't rest on, well, my mother doesn't have breast cancer. You still have to talk to your doctor. You've got to know if there's changes in your own breast and make sure that you're following up on those.
What was the period of time between the most recent mammogram that you had and the one that you scheduled as the result of the encouragement from your aunt and mom?
I had my screening mammogram that spring of 2011. Actually around the same time that my aunt was diagnosed. My mom was diagnosed in the fall of 2011, and I was diagnosed in the fall of 2011.
And so that was in the same year. So if she followed guidelines, she would not have gone in for a screening mammogram again.
It would have been so easy. It feels like it would have been so easy for you to have said, I was just there. If nothing was wrong then, nothing's wrong now. I'll do this, but I'm not going every day, and I'm not going twice in a year. I'll go next year. I'll go in 3 years. I don't know. No one should follow my advice. But it would have been, bottom line, it would have been easy to say, Mom, I appreciate your concern. I'll go again next year. That's normal. That would be, as a layperson, a sensible seeming advice.
I was going to say, truth be
told,
exactly.
I did, because when I told my mom I was going to go in, but I was a volunteer with Komen for 10 years before my diagnosis. So I had a mammogram every year. So when my mom said, I need you to get a mammogram, I was like, I've already had it. She was like, please do this for me. And I really did not want to go in to have it, because I said, well, I can wait until the spring of 2012. I'm so happy that I listened to my mom, and then I had providers that listened to me, because that provider could have very well said, well, you just come in already, so you don't need to do another mammogram. But they said, not only come in, but they scheduled me that same week.
We have about a minute left in this segment. Having conversations about all this is something about which there is no disagreement. These are really important conversations to have between family, friends, what have you.
Yes, and Thanksgiving is coming, so if you want to talk to your family, what a better time to sit around the Thanksgiving table and ask about family health history and talk about what your risk is, and really make sure that you're looking. A lot of women sometimes do their screening in the new year, so I definitely encourage women to get those appointments in and have those conversations.
Have the conversations, indicate to one another that you are concerned about their health, and that in general proactive is certainly the best way to go. Ladies, stand by for just a moment. We'll take a break. We'll come back though with more News Talk here on News Channel 8 right after this.